Hey kids, welcome to Unit 3, Lesson 2, Array Elements, Exercise number 3. This is an investigate and modify lesson. This program contains a string array that stores a list of countries and a double array that stores the percentage of each country's population that uses the internet in order. And what we're going to do is we're going to use our investigate activities guide from our previous exercise to help us guide along this lesson. I like to look at the code first before we look at the questions. Probably should do it the other way, but let's look at the code first, kids. We have our array names, and that's a string storing a bunch of country names. We have a array internet usage, which is a double. That's storing the percentage of each population using the internet. Looks like from the countries class, we're instantiating a new object, countries data, taking two parameters, and that's our array's name and internet usage. And then it looks like we have some get methods we're printing off, and then a print data method here. Over in our countries class, we have two private arrays, names and data. We have one constructor. It takes two parameters, names and data. That's what we saw over here. We have our get methods. We're getting the name and the data. And our print method here takes one parameter, message. Looks like it's creating a string result, which is blank. It's creating an integer index, which is set to 0. It is a while loop. We've seen this before. While the index is less than or equal to names.length. Ooh. And this is our length friend from this unit. And this returns the length of an array. And this is just saying, hey, as long as index, which is 0, is less than the total number of elements in an array here, then keep going through. And it looks like results, which is what we're returning, is adding the name at that index and the data at that index, and again getting message passed along. Then we're increasing our index counter by 1 and then rerunning our while loop. And if you're confused about this message, this is just this parameter being passed along. So print data can also take a parameter, which is just a string message, and that's what's being passed along there. Let's go ahead and look at our guided questions. So we read through the code. What do you think the purpose of the while loop is? I think every time this while loop runs, it is printing the name of the country and the percentage using the internet and this message we're passing along. I'm fairly confident, kids, if we want to print off an array, well, this is how we have to do it. We have to loop through the elements one at a time. We just can't print an array off. I think this loops through the elements one at a time because we cannot just print an array. My spelling, kids, make that red just to keep it uniform. And do I think this code will work? Yes or no? Looking back here, I think we're going to have some problems. I think there's a couple things here that are getting called improperly, and I think our indexes are a little off too. Let's go ahead and just write, no, I think there will be several errors. I think one is going to be printing off the list of countries. One will be an out of bounds. I think there will be one more. I'm not sure. Let's go ahead and run the code and see if I'm right, kids. Well, we got an out of bounds error. Index 10 is out of bounds for a length of 10. Well, that is a pretty big hint there, kids. Remember, our counting system goes from 0 to 9. 10 is just a rollover going from 0 to 1, just like an odometer of a car. And if we go down to our while loop, our problem is right here. We're going through the name's length.
But the last position in our array is 9, and that is the exception. To fix that,
All we do is just do -1. Let's see if that fixed our error. It fixed most of them. We still have 2 here. And if we go over to our print, we can see countries data get names. Well, if we go over to get names here, that's just returning names. We actually want how many countries there are. And how could we fix that? Well, we don't want to call country data here. We've learned we have to loop through to print stuff out. And we could certainly do a loop to print these off. But we just want to know how many countries there are. And it is names here. And I bet if we just do names.length, our old friend here, and hit run, oh, here's an important one, kids. Length is not a method with a parameter. It's something we call here, right? We should not have any parentheses afterwards. Let's hit run now. It'll work. Oh, we do need one parenthesis for our print statement, though. Can't get rid of everything. And now you can see, kids, we got countries 10. Now we have the same issue down here. We're getting a location of where this is at, but we're not getting each individual one. We just can't call it directly, right? So what are we going to do? I'm going to do something very similar to print data here, but we're going to write a print percentage instead. I'm going to start my new method down here. And this is going to be called print percentage. What we want to do is get the average percentage using the internet across 10 countries. That means we're going to need some sort of sum divided by number of countries. What do we need to put first? Well, we need to declare it public. It's going to be a double because we're doing some math here in division. And I'm going to name it print percent. We need some parentheses and some curly cues. Like any while statement, we need an index. We're going to create an index, and that's going to be equal to 0. We also need this sum number up here, something to store it. And that's probably going to be a double. We'll call it sum for right now. And that's going to be equal to what? Well, if we were just doing regular math, we would just be adding up the data, the percentage, right? We need to do that at each individual index. So the sum is going to be equal to data at each index that we call. That's our variables to hold our information. Let's write our while loop. So we have while, and we'll come over here, do our curly cues, open that up. What do we want inside of our while? Well, as long as the index is less than the data dot length, and remember, we just learned that should be -1. What do we want to have happen? Well, we want to get that sum, right?
And we want that sum to be equal to sum plus the data, which is the index we're at. We don't want it at the index we're at, kids. We want it plus 1. And this is a little wordy. And remember, kids, we can delete this part and then flip our operators, and it says the same thing. Don't forget your curly Q here. And then we're going to go up an index. So we're going to go index is going to be equal index plus 1. Or we could write it as plus plus. That's what we want to have happen inside the while loop. After the while loop, it's not a void, so we need to return something. And we're going to return our math problem up here. We're just going to go sum divided by the data dot length. Should have done an end of class here, kids. Now when we call print percent, it should look through each index, get that number, add it to itself, and then at the end, that large number, it's going to divide it by the length or number of countries we have in our data array. Now we have to call this print percent. Over here we're getting data. We want print percent. So we're going to get print percent. Now when I hit run, I should get a number down here instead of a location. Well, let's see if we're right, kids. Now we have 10 countries using the internet. Looks like 68% is the average across 10 countries. And if you add up the numbers here, I think that's going to be pretty close. Always remember to check your math, kids. Key takeaway from this lesson, kids, is really understanding and diving into this idea of length, element numbers, and how an array functions. Let's look at this example. If we have 10 elements in an array, and we're telling it return the length, remember our index is starting at 0, and really that's saying is while our numbers is less than 10, we want to keep going. But since our array has 10 numbers, and our last position is 9, that is going to throw us an exception. So we have to be careful of that. How do we fix that? Well, in this case, we just did length minus 1. Also, remember, if you want to access the last element of an array, you also have to use this length minus 1. So there's 2 uses for it. Finally, understanding how we loop through an array using while loops to access different elements within it is very important. At least 2 of your questions on the FRQ are going to deal with looping through an array. One 1D, the other is going to be a 2D, which we'll cover in the next unit. Understanding how to access these different elements and ultimately add, remove, or change that data is key to being successful on the AP CSA exam. We still have a little to learn about writing these loops, but at this point you should understand at least a basic concept that in order to print information in an array, we have to loop through each element. Hopefully, kids, this video helped you understand array elements a little better. As always, if you have any questions, come see me. Otherwise, I'll see you in the next video. See you later, kids. Bye, bye, bye.